Yeah, nice to see you here in Berlin. Yeah, quick words to myself. I'm Benjamin from the SAP Open Source Program Office. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Robert. I'm with the OSPO of Bosch.
Yeah, so we've been brought together. Oh no, we have to talk about Bosch quickly.
Yeah, we
Sorry
do the
for that.
Bosch slide first. So just like we are roughly a little bit more than 400,000 employees worldwide, and we have more than 400 different legal entities. So like from an organizational point of view, quite a complex structure. We are active in certain areas like household appliances, cars, and other things. You can see it all here. And like the OSPO is currently located in the Bosch Digital.
Recording in progress.
Okay, nice. In the Bosch Digital branch, which is kind of like the central IT infrastructure service provider for all of the different legal entities of Bosch.
Yeah, and Peter already talked a lot of SAP, so we'll skip on that one. If you have questions, you can come out to anyone with the green shirts with SAP on it. Yeah, we've been brought together by Guillaume and Georg because we both applied with a rather similar topic to the summit, and they thought, well, why not do a talk together? And then Robert and I sat together and found that many companies have many similarities, like this computer here. It's not a dual toaster, it's a computer. So yeah, if you look at companies from the outside, companies have many, many similarities, right? Especially when you talk about stuff like InnerSource. But if you dig deeper, you'll get to the internals of the computer and the company, and you'll see that there's still similarities. Like we still have CPUs, we have GPUs and all that, like a main board. But in detail, you'll find that some companies have Intel, some have others. And as such, also InnerSource differs. And for example, we'll be talking about data, about insights. It's also different on what we want to gather out of the data we acquire. For example, InnerSource in SAP is a very bottom-up approach, and we want to see how much it pays off what we're doing, how much InnerSource activity is really happening across our company. So what we are up to is look at the activity in our GitHubs and actually see what of these activities are InnerSource activities.
Yeah, and within Bosch, we have kind of like InnerSource as well. But I would say, like from the talks to Benjamin, we have way more regulation around it, I would say, than SAP. And so we have certain other things which make InnerSource for us InnerSource. That's kind of like, for example, we have an InnerSource license in the company and SAP does not. And we also have a restriction who can actually join InnerSource inside of Bosch because not every employee inside of the company can actually join. So there are slight differences between how we approach that. Yeah. And so we thought, okay, when we're talking about data, why are we talking about data and why do you collect data? It's usually because you want to answer questions. And so there are a couple of different people and maybe you can relate to one of them. And it's kind of like, for example, we have Martin, the manager, we have Amelia, the engineer, and then we have the developer and the InnerSource expert, for example, like the both of us. And then maybe also an analyst, and they are all interested in different things about InnerSource. And then it's kind of like a manager typically, first question, what is InnerSource, if he doesn't know yet. Then the next question is obviously what does it cost? How do you measure cost? How do we measure success? And what are the actual benefits and these kind of things, right?
Yeah, and for example, the engineer is rather involved in where could I find information on something, who's involved in the project, who could I ask, who could I contact. Is a project or some topic relevant for my domain? Can I expand my network within the company? Relatively similar questions does have the developer, right? So he's also interested in where can you find something. But he's maybe also interested in which technology is being used in a project and how others do things that he might be necessary to do as well. And maybe also the questions if my organization is already engaged in whatever topic. The InnerSource expert, who many of us are, is rather interested, does whatever we do within the company pay off for the company? So how much is really happening? Is InnerSource growing? Who is involved in which topics or projects? Are we actually breaking down the silos, right? That big metaphor many companies have. and yeah, do my measures really work to grow InnerSource in companies?
Yeah, and then maybe the analyst is also interested in kind of like on a broader scope, maybe on a legal entity level or even on the global company level. It's kind of like what are key technologies the company is working on? What is kind of like maybe what's the global footprint? So where can we see engagement in InnerSource around the world? And then where we might want to invest, not in terms of maybe budget or money, but maybe in terms of capacity of people actually doing stuff, right? And so, but the key question always for us and for the company is really this, does collaboration happen outside of the regular collaboration, which is kind of like forced from top level? So managers saying, yeah, you two have to work together. Is that really, so are we really breaking down those silos at the end of the day?
Yeah, so let's start with a bigger picture and we'll zoom into all of these details. Don't worry, we'll take a closer look at that. But let's start at the very central thing, which is actually the places where we keep our code and do our work with. And the lowest entity, so to say, is the commit, right? Everyone might recognize that Git tree here. And a commit has several metadata attached to it, like who is the author of a commit, when did it happen, the message, so what really was part of that commit, any additional statistics, like I don't know, maybe the amount of code or so, and the repository it belongs to. The repository is the next greater entity, containing information about the maintainers, contributors to a project, rather specific to Bosch because of the amount of legal entities is a dedicated license internally, an InnerSource license. The different languages being used in a project, its dependencies, and also the time it was created and things happened in the project. If we look away from the repositories, the data, or the code location, we can also add other data sources to our analytics. And that could be directories, like, for example, Microsoft's Entra ID. Many of you might know that, which is the successor of Azure Active Directory. And there you can actually, for example, access employee information, like where they're located, what department they belong to, what cost center they are assigned to, and also, for example, access the company's hierarchy and structure.
Yeah, and we at Bosch, we go also one step further because we are also looking into our ERP system because we have those legal entities and we actually need to figure out, okay, like which internal organization belongs to which legal entity and things like that. And so we are also taking the data out of there. And what you essentially can do with that is now you can like pretty much sketch a broader picture of the contributor itself, right? So now you have the commit data, you have the repository where he or she was active in, and now you have also like the country and the department, but also the legal entity and the overall organization. And now what you can actually do is like you can start answering all those questions you have seen earlier. It's kind of like, so in my business unit, what are the top like programming languages? So easy, right? You can do that on department level and then go up to all the way to the whole company. You could also see about like what are the technologies being used, where might it make sense if it's an open source technology to maybe let people contribute to because it's mission critical for a huge chunk of your organization. You can also see kind of like how many developers per organizational entity are involved and where do you might need to go into and figure out, okay, if you have kind of like a comparison between what are the overall number of developers who could engage and what are the actual numbers who are engaged. And it's kind of like, it would give you some idea where you could do targeted marketing for InnerSource, for example. And then you could, like, if you have those historized data, you can also see that over time and see growth over time compared to legal entities. And then you can also all of a sudden start seeing, okay, did you have this conference with this like organizational entity a couple of weeks back or a couple of months back, and can you actually see a growth path, right? So is that actually really something which is worth investing in? And obviously the global footprint. So for us, it's really interesting to see, does that also match with the key developer locations we have? So we have a very large global footprint inside of Bosch, but not every country is a major development or a developing country in terms of a lot of developers, software engineers, and so forth are there.
Yeah, I said before, we at SAP have been more interested in finding out if, for example, a commit is an inner source commit. So if it was done from, let's say, foreign party to the project team. And we essentially came up with different methods to measure that. There's stuff like we look what the privileges of a person are in a certain repository. So for example, if someone has write access or more, we perceive him to be part of the maintaining team, and everyone with less privileges is likely to be an inner source committer. Another option is that you can configure a GitHub team to contain all maintainers, and everybody who's not part of that will then be an inner source committer. Both have their drawbacks, like for example, for very big repositories, mono repositories where you have different configurations and maybe also different branch protections, which is a GitHub specific thing. There, these things do not work too well. Also, manually configuring a team. I mean, we all know how likely it is that we'll take good care of manual work. So that team will be set up once and then it's wrong after a certain time with people being added or removed from the team. So there's one method we try to look into, which is our org structure. This is our org structure. And we have the person doing a commit, right? Might be Max Mustermann or so. And then we try to find out to which team the project belongs. We do not have that configured, unfortunately, in a clear, concise way in SAP. So we have to use something to find that out. And currently, we take the most active committer to a project and say he's part of the core team. And then we take him in the org structure, for example, him and him. And then we calculate the distance in between in our org structure. And then larger this distance is, then more likely it is an inner source commit. So that's one thing we currently try to evaluate. It's very specific, to be honest, per project. Where we have projects that are pretty much spread across multiple organizations, but they're still part of a core team. And we have others where it's very clear that when you're above like 4 or so as a measurement, it's more likely to be an inner source commit. But yeah, as I said, that's statistics, so that's not as precise, as hard as saying yes or no, but that's something we're trying to get along with to measure inner source activity in our company.
Yeah, and we pretty much have the same question. It's kind of like, is it really a successful inner source repository? And then success in that way means kind of, is it breaking down silos? Do we have a lot of engagement from different entities? And so rather than doing this organizational thing, which is quite interesting, so I learned that in the preparation of the talk, and I will think about that. Maybe we integrate it as well inside our company. But what we currently do is we rather look at the contributions, and then we pretty much build a heap map per repository, and then we look at the organizational entities or legal entities, so to speak, and the more which are contributing to a single repository, the more likely it is that we actually see this breakdown of silos. If we have like 2 or 3 legal entities, that is quite common inside of Bosch because they have always collaboration going on, right? There's contracting and things like that. But what you rarely see is kind of like 5 or more, right? And then at a certain threshold, you can simply assume that this is actually a real inner source project and really successful. Yeah. So that is all about how we like combine the data and what questions are we trying to answer with that. And you can see you can already answer a lot of those questions we raised earlier. And to some extent, we can actually see and say, yeah, we see this breakdown of silos. Maybe not to the extent you can see on the image here, so we are not there yet where we want to be, but it's kind of like it really starts to be broken down. Yeah. And now it would be time for Q&A.